As the old saying goes, all good things must come to an end. And that's true with National Football League and great football teams as well. Well, the dynasty of the Detroit Lions in the 1950s seemed to come to an end in 1957, but it's one last glory year. Randy Snow of the World of Football podcast joins us to tell us all about the National Football League that year and his Detroit Lions. He's up in just a moment to tell us all about 1957.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And welcome to another edition of our pre-Super Bowl NFL championship games. We are really having a great time with these things, learning a lot about the early NFL players, the teams, the coaches, and some of the history of the NFL that maybe we didn't discuss before. And as always, we have an expert on from the winning team that, giving us all the details. And once again, Randy Snow is joining us because we have the Detroit Lions in the 1957 championship game. Randy, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Thank you, Darren. I'm surprised you didn't use expert when you said I was an expert on the Lions.
No, that's Adam's job. We'll let Adam continue to do that.
Yeah,
so.
that's true.
So,
That's true.
no,
But no,
so-
I've had a lot of fun doing the research for this, and I again, like I say every time, thank you for getting me to do this. I had to look up a lot of facts on the games. I mean, as Lions fans, you don't always know your team's history as well as you should, but you wanted to do these, and I've learned so much, and so I thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on with you. I've really enjoyed it.
No, we appreciate it because as I'm sure tonight will be the same as the other times where we've learned so much about the Lions and we've learned so much about every team that's been in the championship game so far. This has really been a great experience for myself as well. So I've learned a lot by
Yeah.
guests like you that have this great expertise in doing the research. So what can you tell us about the 1957 National Football League and your Detroit Lions?
Well, let's go back just a few years because the Lions and the Browns played four times. This was their fourth meeting of the 1950s in the championship game. So you got to go back to 1952. The Lions beat the Browns 17-7 in Cleveland. And before that game, there was a playoff game that had to be played also, where Detroit had to go out to Los Angeles and beat the Rams out there. So this season is kind of the same way. There was a playoff game before the championship game. In 53, the Lions defeated the Browns 17-16 in Detroit. So that was a really close game. And then in 1954, the Browns defeated the Lions 56-10 in Cleveland. So 2 out of 3 for Detroit. And the 57 game was really going to be something. Everybody wanted to win this one against the Browns again. But the season started out very strange because head coach Buddy Parker, who had led the Lions since 1951, abruptly quit the team at a banquet before the first preseason game. He was replaced by assistant offensive coach George Wilson. Parker said the Lions were the worst team he had ever seen during training camp that year. And he really felt like he was losing the team. The players were out of control. When you've got Bobby Lane and all his drinking, and he's taking all of his buddies on the team with him drinking and getting in trouble. So he just felt that he didn't have any control over the team anymore. But it wasn't just the players that he didn't think he had control over. It was also Lions ownership at the time. They started meddling in making decisions like, we want you to draft this guy. Don't draft this one, get this one. So, they were meddling with him too, and he didn't like that. So I think it just all came to a head that night at a banquet when he was getting up there to speak, and nobody expected it. He just said, you know what? I can't take this team anymore. I quit. And he walked off. And that was it. But
That's
two
really
weeks.
puzzling that he would sort of say that about Lane because they hooked up a few years later in
Yes, they
Pittsburgh.
did. Yes, they did. But some coaches, they want things to go their own way. And boy, when you've got a loose cannon like Bobby Lane on your team, it just doesn't always go that way. So I think he was just tired of all the shenanigans that had gone on over the years. Um, but yeah, 2 weeks after he quit, the Lions, he signed as the head coach of the Steelers. And what happened after that? Well, Parker's first preseason game that season was against the Lions. The game was actually played in Buffalo, New York on September 8th, and Pittsburgh won that game 20-14. But the Steelers and the Lions didn't play during the regular season at all or playoffs that year. So that was the only meeting between the Lions and the Steelers in 1957 was a meaningless preseason game. So let's get into
That
the
was a Steelers championship game that year. They just played it at the beginning of the
in
year.
in their mind, I'm sure it was. They beat the Lions. Yep. So let's get into the 57 season. The Lions had a record of 8-4 that year, which is pretty good. But they did start out with a loss to the Baltimore Colts, 34-14. And a lot of people were thinking, well, maybe Buddy Parker had a point. Maybe this is the worst Lions team, and they're not going to do well this year because we lost to the Colts. The Colts were a pretty good team that year, and it didn't affect anything because the Lions went on to beat the Packers, they beat the Rams, they beat the Colts again in a second meeting, and then they wound up losing to the Rams and the 49ers out west, and they just started to steamroll after that. They beat the Packers on Thanksgiving Day, and then December 8th, they played the Browns, and they beat the Browns 20-7. But in the second quarter of that game, Bobby Lane broke his right leg, and his right ankle was dislocated. Uh, he'd only completed 2 passes that day for 15 yards. He was replaced by Tobin Rote, who had been acquired in a trade with the Packers just before the season started. And they went on to win the next game under Tobin Rote to beat the Bears in the season finale. And that forced a playoff game because the 49ers also had an 8-4 record. So Detroit had to go out to Kezar Stadium in San Francisco in front of 60,000 ravenous 49ers fans to win that game in order to get to the championship game against the Browns again. And this game was pretty much all San Francisco in the first half. The halftime score was 24-7. The Lions were losing. And early on in the third quarter, the 49ers kicked a field goal to make it 27-7. It was looking pretty bad for Detroit, but that was all the points that San Francisco was going to score that day. The Lions, right after that, they scored a touchdown from Tom Tracy. That was a 1-yard run. Tom Tracy had a 58-yard run. Gene Gedman had a 2-yard run. And,
Mhm.
and the Lions scored 3 touchdowns in 4.5 minutes to take a 28-27 lead. And finally, Jim Martin kicked a 13-yard field goal for the final score, making the final 31-27 in favor of Detroit. A lot of people say that this is the greatest comeback in Lions history, and I can't argue with that because when you're down that much in a game that means so much, a playoff game to get to the championship game, they've had great comebacks during the regular season many times, but in a game like that in a hostile territory, man, that's got to be one of their greatest comebacks ever.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic because you talk about the Lions, lose their coach before the season starts at the preseason banquet. They lose their first preseason game. I'm looking at a chart online that shows the 57 season, each division, who was leading it week by week. Detroit did not have sole possession of the Western Division all year long until
Mm,
they beat the 49ers in a playoff game.
mm,
It was the
wow.
Colts and the 49ers, or Detroit might be tied with them here and there. But they're really not in the picture. Where you look at the other side, Cleveland read it from the word go. They led the whole
Right.
season. So
Yeah.
it was sort of a comeback season for them all year long. They got behind the eight ball a little bit and had to put on some moves and mustard a little bit at the end.
Yeah. And yeah, behind all season long and losing their starting quarterback, it looked bad for Detroit, but they came through, that's for sure. Looking at some of the stats from that 49ers game, Tobin Rote was 16 of 30 passing for 214 yards. He had a touchdown, an interception, and a fumble. Running back Tom Tracy ran the ball 11 times for 86 yards and scored 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver Steve Junker had 8 catches for 92 yards and a touchdown for Detroit. Looking at San Francisco, Y.A. Tittle had some comparable stats to Tobin Rote. He was 18 of 31 passing for 248 yards. He threw for 3 touchdowns, but he also had three interceptions and three fumbles in the game, and that I think was the difference right there. You can't do that in a championship game.
Mhm. Right.
Let's see. Running back Hugh McElhenney ran 14 yards for 82 yards. I'm sorry, 14 times for 82 yards. And wide receiver Billy Wilson had nine catches for 107 yards and a touchdown to lead the receivers. So that set up the 57 championship game in Detroit against the Browns. The Lions were 9-4 at that time, and the Browns were 9-2-1. Cleveland was actually a 3-point favorite to win the game because, like you said, they didn't have any challenges all season long like Detroit did, and so everybody thought Cleveland was going to beat Detroit again, especially after beating them a few years ago, 56-10.
Mhm.
So nobody was giving Detroit any hope, even though they were at home.
Hmm.
So let's see. You'll love this. The most expensive tickets to the game were $10 for box seats at Briggs Stadium. The cheapest ones were $4 for bleacher seats. Man, I wish we had those kind
Yeah,
of
geez.
tickets again.
I was gonna
But
sign me up for the luxury seat there for $10.
yeah, yeah, really. Oh my gosh. But this game was all Detroit. They got out to a 17 to nothing lead until the second quarter. They were up 17 nothing at the end of the first quarter. And at the first play of the second quarter, they handed off to their rookie running back Jim Brown, who ran for 29 yards and a touchdown, making it a 17-7 game. Brown's touchdown, was the first play of the second quarter. I already told you that. Let's see. Lion Steve Junker had a 26-yard pass from Tobin Rote to make it 24-7. Junker's touchdown was the result of a fake field goal. Coach George Wilson had called for a field goal, but Rote called for a fake in the huddle without telling the coach. It was a play the team had been working on in practice the week before. So maybe Buddy Parker had a point that the team was out of control. They weren't listening to the coach. This was a play that, had it not worked, it could have been disastrous. I mean, they were only up 17-7 at the time, and luckily it did work. I mean, it caught everybody off guard, and Steve Junker was wide open and just kind of walked in the end zone from there. So it worked perfectly, but George Wilson had no idea they were going to do that because he told him to kick a field goal.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just to clarify, this is this is a famous George Wilson in football, but it's not George Wildcat Wilson. They sort of played in the same era. Some
Mm,
people get confused by that. But this George
yeah.
Wilson attended Northwestern, and or the other one attended was it Washington, somewhere out west, Steve.
Uh, yeah, I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, I think it was Washington or Oregon or somebody like that in the Northwest. So sorry about that.
Okay.
I just wanted to make
Oh,
that
no,
clear.
no, that's okay. Okay, so after that, Lions rookie defensive back Terry Barr had a 19-yard pick six, making the score 31-7. And after that play, Browns quarterback Tommy O'Connell was replaced by rookie quarterback Milt Plum. So after halftime, the Browns did score a touchdown to start. It was Lou Carpenter on a 5-yard run. That brought the score to 31-14 in favor of Detroit. And then after that, just like the San Francisco game, it was all Detroit. Jim Doran caught a 78-yard pass from Tobin Rote. Steve Junker caught another 23-yard pass from Tobin Rote. Uh, Lions wide receiver Dave Middleton had a 32-yard pass from Tobin Rote. That made the score 52-14. But they weren't done yet. Uh, they took out Tobin Rote because he'd had such a great game and it looked like they were going to win. So they put in their backup quarterback, and he threw a 16-yard touchdown pass to Howard Hopalong Cassidy. The quarterback's name was Jerry Reichow. It's spelled really weird. I had to write it out phonetically, but Jerry Reichow was the backup. And so this kind of avenged the 56-10 loss to the Browns in 1954. Just a great day all around for Detroit. Uh, I guess that was their motive. They'd get behind in the first half and then they'd make a big comeback in the second half. So they did that two games in a row at the end of the season to win the championship.
Yeah, isn't it funny how it seems there's teams they have like a stigma like that, and it just sort of stay true to that all season long. It's just their modus operandi.
Yeah.
And they just maybe they're not it's not that they're not ready for the game, but maybe they're just not motivated until halftime and some rousing speech, or they say, "Oh my God, we might lose this game," and the angst gets into them. It's just an odd occurrence, and these guys seem to do it quite a bit in 1957.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember hearing that George Wilson at halftime just told the team, remember 1954, how they lost that game. And it must have worked. I don't think he was big into giving, the big rah-rah speeches at halftime, but he just reminded them, think about what we did in 54 and how that turned out. And I guess that's all he needed to say. And the team responded. But looking at some of the stats from this game, Tobin Rote was 12 of 19 passing for 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also ran 7 times for 27 yards and a touchdown. He had one fumble, but single-handedly between his passing and his rushing, he accounted for 307 yards of total offense just by himself. Not bad
Jeez.
for a backup quarterback. Jerry Rayclaw was one of two passing for 16 yards and 1 touchdown. He was mainly a receiver, but he became the backup quarterback in Detroit after Bobby Lane was injured, and he wore number 80. So it's weird to see that touchdown play. Number 80 goes back and throws a touchdown pass for the Lions. Just a little strange. And
He might have one of the greatest stats for a quarterback in championship history of the National Football League.
Well, it was the only touchdown of his 8-year NFL career. He never threw another touchdown again, and
Wow.
it came in a championship game. So I'm sure that's I don't know if he still has that football or not, or saved that football, but he should have if he didn't.
Right, right.
Now, Howard Hopalong Cassidy, he ran 8 times for 48 yards, and he caught 2 passes for 22 yards and a touchdown. For Cleveland, Tommy O'Connell was 4 of 8 passing for just 61 yards. I think that's why they replaced him with Milt Plum. Milt Plum, on the other hand, was 5 of 12 passing for 51 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He was a rookie out of Penn State. They had just selected him in the draft in the second round of the 57 draft that year. Jim Brown ran 20 times for 69 yards and a touchdown. But he also returned 4 kicks in the game for 106 yards. It seems strange to think of Jim Brown returning kickoffs and punts, but he did, and he did a fine job at it too as a rookie. And finally, Cleveland had 7 turnovers in the game, so you cannot do that in a
Yeah,
championship
that's
game. And
painful.
yep, yep, there were 55,200 in attendance in Detroit that day, and they all went home pretty happy. I'm sure from from the cold. I'm sure they had to keep warm that day, but they went home happy.
There
The
weren't
winning
too many cars getting built in Motor City that day, right?
probably though for the next few days, probably I think there was
Right.
probably a lot of celebrating going on. The winning players received almost $4,300 for winning that game, and uh, that was a lot more than some people made in an entire year back in 1957. So it was pretty good money for the players that day. It doesn't sound like a whole lot now, but that was really really good
I'd
payoff
take
for
that
winning.
paycheck for one day.
Yeah. This was the fourth meeting of the season for the Browns and the Lions. They met twice in the preseason, with each team winning one of those 2 games, and they met once in the regular season, which was won by Detroit. This was a much different lineup for both of these teams since they met in '54. The Lions now had running back John Henry Johnson, and this was his first season in Detroit after spending 3 seasons with the 49ers as part of their $1 million backfield. Of course, no Bobby Lane in the game. Second year halfback Howard Hopalong Cassidy was the third overall pick in the 1956 NFL draft by Detroit out of Ohio State. That's a name that a lot of people have probably heard, but they don't know much about him. But what another colorful character for Detroit, as always. Quarterback Tobin Rote played 3 seasons in Detroit from '57 to '59. He then signed with the CFL's Toronto Argonauts and played 3 seasons in Canada from 1960 to 1962. He finished his playing career in the American Football League with the Chargers and the Broncos, and he won an AFL title with the San Diego Chargers in 1963. A lot of
Hmm.
people don't think of Tobin Rote going anywhere else but in Detroit with that 57 game, but went up in Canada and went to the AFL.
Yeah, so I mean that's got to be pretty rare to have a championship in the NFL and the AFL
True,
for
true. I hadn't thought about
as a
that.
starting
Yep.
quarterback. Probably the only
But
one that did. Well, maybe somebody when after the merger or something, but
yeah, probably. Like I said, it was a very different team for Cleveland as well. No Otto Graham, no Marion Motley. Both of those guys retired after the 55 season, but Motley spent his last season playing for the Steelers in 1955. Um, they did have rookie running back Jim Brown, who ran for 942 yards and 9 touchdowns during the regular season.
hmm.
Uh, again, also returning kicks that year. Otto Graham was actually selected in the with the fourth overall pick in the 1944 NFL draft by the Detroit Lions,
Hmm.
but he wound up signing with the Browns of the AAFC instead. And Paul Brown, I think, really wanted him. And what Paul Brown wants, Paul Brown gets. So
Yeah.
he signed with the Browns.
Well, I think we had George Bazika on a couple years ago, and he was talking about that relationship. And Brown, as the head coach of Ohio State, faced Otto Graham, who was with
Yes,
Northwestern, I believe, and
yes,
gave his defense all kinds of fits. And he said to himself at that point, "Hey, someday I need this guy on my team, wherever
yep,
I'm doing." So I think
yeah.
that's sort of how that relationship came about.
Paul Brown knew a good player when he saw one, especially when they when they beat his team.
Right.
Let's see. Browns quarterback Milt Plum would sign with the Lions in 1962 and play in Detroit for 6 seasons through 1967. Yeah, he was a great quarterback for the Lions in the early 60s, and I think a lot of people only know him as a Lions quarterback, and they don't know that he got his start with the Cleveland Browns.
Hmm.
Uh, Halfback Lou Carpenter and his brother Preston Carpenter both played for the Browns in 1957, and they both played in the championship game. Lou was drafted by the Lions in the eighth round of the 1953 draft and played for the team from 1953 to 1955, winning an NFL title with the Lions in 53. He spent a couple of years serving in the army over in Germany, and when he returned from Germany, he was traded by the Lions to the Browns in 1957. His brother, end and halfback Preston Carpenter, was the 13th overall pick in the 1956 NFL draft by the Browns, and he played for the team through 1959. They both played their college football at Arkansas. So I did not know that going into my research for this game that the two brothers played for the Browns in the championship game.
Hmm. Yeah, that is interesting.
Now, a sad thing about Luke Carpenter, in 2016, his daughter Rebecca uh, made a documentary about her father called Requiem for a Running Back. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before. I had not.
No.
After he died in 2010 at the age of 78, his brain was tested and he became the 18th NFL player to be posthumously diagnosed with CTE.
No
He was
kidding.
in a
Wow.
he was a longtime assistant coach in the NFL for almost 30 years, for like 8 different teams after his playing days was over, including a stint as an assistant coach with the Lions in 1987 and 1988. It's not a very happy ending there, but
No.
hopefully that research will help other players in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, now everybody talks about the curse of Bobby Lane, and you everybody has heard the story that when Lane was traded to the Steelers in '58, that he cursed the team, saying that they would never win another title for 50 years or something like that. I have been a Detroit Lions fan since 1975, and I never heard that in all my years of being a fan until that 50th anniversary was coming near. I don't know where that came from, but everybody just seems like that's a documented fact. I don't know if that's true or not, because I had never heard about it. And
Hmm.
but Peyton
I
Manning and Jeff Daniels evidently broke that curse on Peyton's show, Peyton's Places on ESPN Plus. I don't know if you ever saw that episode. This
I
this
did.
the show Peyton's Places is awesome. I just love Peyton Manning and the shows that he does. And they were at Ford Field and they had a bathtub full of gin or something, I forget. And they exercised the curse. And right after that show aired, the Lions started winning, and they've been winning ever since. So I do think if there was a curse, it's broken, and it's just a matter of time before Detroit gets in a Super Bowl and wins it all.
Well,
That's my feeling.
look at all the other curses. I mean, Boston's curse that was broken. You know, the
Yep.
curse of the Bambino.
Yep.
The Cubs had the
The
curse with the
the
goat.
Cubs, yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
they end up breaking that. So Detroit, you're due.
Yeah. Another interesting fact about the 57 game that I read about, defensive tackle and future Hall of Famer Alex Karras joined the Lions in 1958, but he signed his contract before the Lions played their 57 championship game, and he was actually in attendance on the sidelines during that 57 championship game. I did not know that either.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. Now here's some interesting facts. I was looking at my spreadsheet that I've got all the NFL champions in it. From 1950 to 1957, seven out of the eight NFL championship games featured just three teams: the Browns, the Rams, and the Lions. Get this: 1950, Browns defeated the Rams. 51, the Rams defeated the Browns. 52, the Lions defeated the Browns. 53, the Lions defeated the Browns. 54, the Browns beat the Lions. And in 55, it was the Browns over the Rams again. The only one that was different was 1956, the Giants over the Bears, but then 1957 you had the Lions over the Browns. So 7 out of 8 championship games featured one of those three teams, either the Browns, the Lions, or the Rams.
Yeah, that's just that's really that blows your mind, especially how many Cleveland had in that span, being in the
Yes,
championship game.
10
Really,
straight years
really,
of going to a championship game.
yeah,
Yes.
amazing,
Yeah. Yep.
amazing, amazing, amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Browns, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there's another tie-in that I learned last year. I had the opportunity to interview Dick LeBeau, coach
Oh,
of the Steelers, and I didn't realize this. I did well, after he told me he was actually drafted by Paul Brown and the Browns. They cut
hmm.
him. He drove around the lake and went to the Lions camp and made the team, and the rest is history for his
Yeah.
great career. So
Yep.
another tie-in. But so he wasn't 57, but he did play at Ohio State where Paul Brown coached or has
Right.
coached.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The Browns would go on to win one more NFL title in '64, but the '57 title was the last for the Lions. And as you can tell by my shirt, rebuilding since 1957, and we're so close. We're kind of like the Curse of Oak Island. They're so close to finding what they're looking for, and Detroit is just that close to winning it all. And I'm hoping it's going to be this year, but we'll see. We'll see what
We'll
happens.
see. Uh, some kind of bad news recently, though, losing their center. That was
Yeah.
kind of surprising, at least to me it was. Maybe other
No, it took us
follow.
by surprise too. Frank Ragnow, after only 7 seasons and 29 years old, decided that it was time for him to retire. He's been such a great anchor on that offensive line for us at center, calling the plays and whatnot. He's going to be missed, but I think Detroit has. I don't know if they were expecting this, but they were preparing for it, and that's what good teams do. They prepare for people leaving or getting hurt, so you've got to have depth. They've got a good center now, and they just drafted another good one this year. So hopefully we'll be fine. Hopefully it won't hurt us too much, but again we'll have to wait and see.
Right. Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, from 1960, uh, yeah, I just got through saying that the 57 game was the last for the Lions. However, from 1960 to 1969, the NFL played in something called the Playoff Bowl. I don't know if you remember this, but the Detroit Lions won the first three of these games. The game was officially known as the Burt Bell Benefit Bowl, after the late NFL commissioner who passed away in 1959. The second place teams from the East and the West met after the NFL championship game to decide who was the third best team in the league. this was really a bad idea. It was a meaningless game. It meant nothing. It was just a way to showcase and get one more game out there. They were trying to get some of the attention away from the new AFL, so they threw in another game after the championship game. But even though it was meaningless, it meant a lot to the Lions fans. Most of these games were played in the Orange Bowl in Miami. In 1967, or I'm sorry, 1960, the Lions defeated the Browns in the playoff bowl, 17-16. In 1961, the Lions defeated they defeated the Philadelphia Eagles 38-10. And in 1962, the Lions defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers 17-10 in the first three playoff bowls. So I just think it's ironic that Detroit and Cleveland did get to meet again in some sort of a postseason game, even though it meant nothing. But Detroit still won, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, that's very
And
interesting. It's amazing that they were never really in the same division, never in the same conference, and because they're really not far from each other. I mean,
right, yeah,
and I'm sure probably Detroit sometimes can pick up Cleveland television stations over the lake and vice versa. I know we can get both here in Erie, and we're further east than Cleveland.
yeah.
So
Well, if you look back in the 30s and 40s, the East or the West Division was Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago, and
mm,
the Cardinals and the Bears. So that's as far west as they went was Green Bay. So it's weird to
right.
think of that as the West Division in the NFL.
Yeah, it kind of blows your modern mind, but
Yes.
because we're so used to having teams out west and in the desert and Texas and everything else, but wasn't
Yep.
always like that in the NFL, that's for sure.
Yep. Yep. The last thing I've got to say on this whole 1957 season is today there are only four teams that have never been in a Super Bowl, and that includes the Lions and the Browns, as well as the Jaguars and the Texans. But there was a time in the 1950s decade that Detroit and Cleveland ruled over the entire NFL. And thank you, Darren, for helping me put this all together and get it out there to people. Because yeah, there was a time when the Browns and the Lions were kings of the NFL. Not so much anymore, but that could happen again.
That damn Bobby Lane, I'll tell you.
Well, it's funny, we were at the PFRA convention in Pittsburgh a few years ago,
Mm,
and Bobby Lane, of course, he's on the Pride of the Lions, which is the names on the stadium for great players in Lions history. And you go to the Steelers Hall of Fame or their equivalent to that, and Bobby Lane is in that too. So he's in both teams, greatest players ever on the team. So that's pretty incredible accomplishment for him.
yeah, it definitely is. But he was a great player. Maybe not the most ethical and following all the rules, but there's a lot of guys that did that back. It was a rowdy period in football
Yep.
history.
Yep. He was a character, bigger than life, and people will always remember him for that.
Yeah, most definitely. Randy, I really appreciate you doing this diligent work here. What, four times of these
Yeah.
episodes we had, and
Yeah.
you're a really nice job, and your passion shows through in your fandom as well as your great research and being a historian of the game. So we appreciate you and all the hard work you did to share with us this great history.
Yep. Thank you, Darren, for inviting me to do this. I appreciate it.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.